This is Talk Business and Politics with Roby Brock.
I'm Roby Brock. Welcome to this week's edition of Talk Business and Politics. It's a special edition of the show this week as we close out the year and the decade and take a look forward. I brought three Arkansas executives with a ton of business and political backgrounds into studio right before Christmas to talk about the decade that was and expectations for the future. It's part of our State of the State cover story that's coming out later this month in magazine format. This year's panelists include Darrin Williams, CEO of Southern Bancorp, Elizabeth Bowles, CEO of Aristotle Incorporated, and Davy Carter, Regional President for Centennial Bank in Jonesboro in Northeast Arkansas. Carter and Williams served in the legislature in the first half of the 2010s. You may recall that Williams, a Democrat, was slated to be the first African-American Speaker of the House. But the Republicans took control of the legislature in the 2012 elections, and Carter, a Republican, wound up becoming Speaker over a short controversial period of weeks. All that to say, there was a lot of change in the last decade. Bowles not only had a front seat to the politics of the 10 years, but through her technology perch and as a member of the state's regulatory bank board during a time frame that saw banks like Bank OZK, Simmons, Arvest, and Home Bancshares make scores of acquisitions. She was a witness to plenty of business history, too. After this first break, we'll begin our conversation with Darrin Williams, Elizabeth Bowles, and Davy Carter. I'm going to throw some statistics out from January of 2010. This is where the state of Arkansas's economy was and our politics. We had a jobless rate of 8.2%. We're 3.5% today. We had 110,000 people unemployed. There are less than 48,000 unemployed today. Two big topics of conversation were TARP and the Fayetteville shale play, both of which may be obsolete from our vocabularies. Housing market was still flat. You guys were first-term legislators, and Joyce Elliott was running for Congress in 2010, just like she is in 2020. What a difference a decade makes. What were you doing 10 years ago in your professional lives? Davy, I will come to you first.
Well, you said TARP and those unemployment numbers and throwing those stats out. I mean, you have these flashbacks. I mean, we obviously were coming out of the Great Depression, and here we are today, 10 years later. At the somewhat at the end, maybe, I don't know, 8th, 9th inning of with a great economic cycle. But yeah, I mean, Darrin and I were laughing earlier. I mean, just got elected back in 2009. It seems like yesterday. Time flies. But doing that, banking, I think I had just gotten past the bar a few years ago. I don't know. Time flies. Yeah. But all of those, and it's been a wow. 10 years goes by fast. Right?
Yeah. Elizabeth, what were you doing 10 years ago? I know you were with Aristotle, but I mean, where was the company and you then?
10 years ago, interestingly enough, is when we formed our broadband internet division and started deploying fixed wireless broadband in central Arkansas to reach unserved people with broadband. And I was also appointed to the State Bank Board.
All right. Darrin, how about you?
Well, in addition
you weren't at Southern Bancorp.
I wasn't at Southern Bancorp. No, I was at Carnell Williams Bates and Pulliam law firm and specializing in suing banks and publicly traded companies and securities and class action lawsuits and corporate governance grievances. So a little different than what I'm doing now.
Yeah. So I mentioned the Fayetteville shale play. It was really one of the things that kept the Arkansas economy from really going off the deep edge of the cliff. I mean, we had some tough economic times, but it really did provide a little bit of buoyancy there. Does it surprise any of you that it's not part of our conversation of the economy today?
Well, I'm not sure that it surprises me. I think what you see happening now, with so much emphasis on sustainability and environmental consciousness, there are a lot of questions about fracking, right? Mm-hmm. And so, there's been really a revolution in the whole kind of energy space. There's lots happening in the state of Arkansas, so no, it doesn't surprise me. It was an economic boom. I mean, some landowners kind of hit almost like a lottery for a while there.
Right.
It went well, but I think we're heading in a different direction. Renewables, alternative energy is really taking shape, and I think that's very positive for this country.
Yeah, and it plays into technology as well.
No, it does, and it's interesting because I remember that we had a Fixed Wireless Association meeting in Little Rock, so the whole trade association held their national conference in Little Rock that year, and a friend of mine called me when he landed in Virginia, and he said, "You need to do something. They're fracking you guys all over the place." So he was very concerned about the environment, and I think that Darrin's right. The environment was a piece of it, but I think also I think it still has a future. It's just we have to come at it a more environmentally sustainable, cost-effective way than we approached it before, where it was sort of this exciting gold rush type mentality.
Davy, you're in the great state of Northeast Arkansas, which has been really slow and steady. Even in the recession years, it didn't fall off the cliff as much as some of the other parts of the state did. There was some really stabilization in that market, and we still see that today as well. Agriculture is a big component of that. Do you still see that stability in Northeast Arkansas?
Yeah, I do, and you're right. Ag is a big part of that. Arkansas State University is a huge economic driver for the area, and a lot of medical services, a lot of doctors, a lot of ancillary things that pop up from that. And it is, just very steady, steady progress, and things in Northeast Arkansas are going really, really well. It's changed a lot in 10 years. Doing the contrast back to 08, 09.
And is it just correlation that you happened to move into the area at a time when all of that change happened?
It's correlation, yeah.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
So tell me where you all see potential progress for Arkansas's economy as we head into a new decade. What do you see as a couple of key areas to really keep an eye on? If we could have gone back 10 years ago, we would have said, watch what happens in the banking sector, watch what happens in technology, watch what happens in energy, and we would have talked about some of these things that we see. What do we see as we move into the next phase? Darrin.
Well, I'll tell you, I don't think I would focus so much on a sector. I kind of want to focus a little more broadly. One thing that concerns me and concerns at Southern Bancorp is the growing income and wealth inequality in America, but particularly in the state of Arkansas. If you look at just the median income growth, in just divided by our congressional districts. The second and the third, you see growth. In fact, in the third, probably outpaces the first by almost double. And so Arkansas will not succeed if we don't succeed together. While we are broken down regionally, we've got to be concerned and intentional about those who need a hand up, who need help. And it's just proven that if we can have broad-based prosperity, the entire economy works better. This divide particularly between the wealth between black and white, or people of color and white, or even the gender diversity, the lack of income and wealth inequality among people of color and among women, it's just not sustainable for a country, not for the state of Arkansas. So we've got to make sure that everyone succeeds as we grow.
Elizabeth, you want to chime in on that?
Yeah, actually, I do. I'll chime in exactly on that. I think that over the last 10 years, the state was focused in directions that some of them were really good for the state, but some of them weren't, and particularly when you look at income inequality and broadband, which is obviously what we do, but broadband and the lack thereof is really where it's telling the story of the shrinking of the rural areas of Arkansas. Arkansas went from 47th to 50th in broadband over the last 4 years since they started keeping those. And it's because of these rural, economically challenged, sparsely populated areas that are really the breadbasket of Arkansas. These are farm country. And you see a concentration of the technology and the concentration of the availability of access to services. So my daughter goes to a school where she has everything online, and she goes home at night and she studies her homework, and it's all online. And she has access to educational opportunities that do not exist for some of the children in this state. And until you levelize that, until you levelize the ability of a business to locate in Blytheville or Osceola or, Dumas or wherever they want to locate, you're not going to see you're going to continue to see the shrinking of these regions. And I'll say one more thing about that. We tried to start addressing the issue of broadband in the Delta back in 2010. We identified the Delta as a place in Arkansas that absolutely needed better broadband and that needed that for their economic development. And Purdue University did a study that every dollar you invest in broadband returns $4 into the economy. So by that math, Arkansas should have been focusing on this problem a long time ago. Very pleased to say that we're focusing on it now, not just my company, but as a state.
Let me throw some statistics out here, Davy, that'll fold into this conversation. I know we've looked at the projections for the census data for 2020. The first congressional district, which is a big chunk of East Arkansas, and the Delta has lost 60,000 in population, 40,000 in the 4th congressional district, which is South Arkansas. That's 100,000 have exited the 1st and the 4th district. I think there's about a 15,000 population gain in the 2nd district of Central Arkansas, and it's 85,000 in Northwest Arkansas. So can you reverse those numbers, I guess is my question. What level of investment could you even do to turn those numbers around, if you even can?
I think it's really hard. A lot of people have tried. People are still trying. The Delta is, near and dear to my heart. I mean, my family's still in Marianna. I went down there last week and went to visit them. And every time I go, I just get heartbroken to see, how things have declined, even in the short 20 years since I've been gone. So can it change? Yes. I think it's a long ball play. It won't happen overnight. We've got to, at some point it just becomes, hopefully at some point, it will become an attractive place to be because of the economics of the cost of living and, the natural resources that we have. And I will say this, that I do have some confidence in some of the younger people that are engaged now in the agriculture business. I think they're thinking about things differently, what to grow, how to deliver their crops. We have the largest retailer in the world on the other side of the state. I mean, there's some other ways to do things, but it's going to take a long time. But we can't quit. We can't just let it go. And you're right, this population shift. I mean, they're going to be less represented in Little Rock. I don't know how the congressional maps will ultimately be drawn, but I mean, it's certainly snowballing the wrong way, and I hope the state can continue to pull together and try to resolve the issue. But it's going to be a long play. It's not going to. I hope it happens within my lifetime.
Let me ask a question about agriculture in that respect. Tell me some things that are going to change from what you see now in terms of big farm operations, whether it's big family farm operations or conglomerates. What's going to be different about agriculture over the next decade? What are we going to see investments in? What's going to be different from the current model?
The consumers drive that, right? I mean, it takes time for that to filter down through the production, policies or what people are going to do. But the consumers' habits are shifting. I mean, there is more demand for organic goods and farm to table and what do they call it, grain to glass. I mean, making whiskey and beer and all these things. If it's at Darrin's 40 acres and in the south part of town, if people want to know where their food and their drink and these things come from, and I think these younger folks get that. And again, with this, we have the largest retailer in the world, and right over in the other part of the state, there's got to be a way. And I think people to parlay all these things together. So I think you're going to see a shift in that, but it may take another generation cycle to go because it's the younger people that are. No offense to the older people, I don't mean that way, but I mean I think they do see those things that are different. I mean and I think it's going to be largely kind of geared towards those things that I said, and it's going to be consumer driven.
Yeah.
Can I chime in on there? Because at Southern Bancorp, a significant part of our portfolio is ag-based, operating in the Arkansas Mississippi Delta. Less than it used to be. And what we're seeing it's really tough for the family farmer to make it. You're seeing much more large-scale corporate farming, and so it's tougher for smaller farmers to make. So I think you're going to continue to see that consolidation. You're seeing it in banking. I think you're going to see it in the agricultural space as well. But I think we can't lose sight of the fact that the population of the world's growing, and you've got to feed the world. And in the heart of the Arkansas Mississippi Delta, where you have some of the most fertile land in the world, we're still helping to feed the world. I mean, our second largest export in Arkansas is our agricultural products. And so you're going to see, I think, shifts in ag tech. You're going to see a lot more innovation coming to the space, but we still got to feed the world. And I do believe organic and farm to tables, it's going to continue to grow. But to feed the world, you're still going to have a certain amount of row crops.
So yeah, to add to that, because in respect to feeding the world and to the family farms, I think that when you start looking at smart farming and what technology can bring to the farming enterprise, farming is going to become much more efficient over the next 10 years. And broadband
is pretty damn efficient
it's
now.
Well, they have to be efficient.
Right,
I mean,
right.
the economics don't work if they're not efficient. But this gets down to a square inch of whether you need extra fertilizer on that square inch. It gets very, very granular. And it enables farmers to maximize their output and minimize their expense through high-tech farming. all of that high-tech farming is incumbent on infrastructure, not just broadband, though that's a piece of it, but also other infrastructure being made available. And then when you start seeing areas, other parts of the country where you have the smart farming and you have the infrastructure coming into place, you see reverse urbanization. You see people coming home. Right. You see people moving back into the communities. They bring their spouses back, and the spouse wants a coffee house, so they open a coffee house, and now there's a coffee house, and then the movie theater reopens. So I think we can turn this tide, and I think it does hinge in a very real measure on empowering our farmers and the agriculture sector.
Yeah. You're talking about community building is what you're talking about, which is going on in the urban areas and suburban areas 100%. As well too. When you're talking about that type of the population shifts, the technology, the financing that has to be a part of that, this is not just an Arkansas problem. It is, you see it happening all over the place. It's happening in Texas, it's happening in the Midwest, it's happening on the coast. So I want people to understand it's not an Arkansas problem. Right. So do you all agree on that?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Oh yeah, no, it's not an Arkansas problem.
And I think, back to these populated areas, I mean, there are a lot of talented people out in the world, right? I mean, we all travel and see and go to cities and see things. I mean, it's the coffee shops, it's the music, it's the neighborhood pubs. But, how do we, I guess and Darrin's right, I mean, and you're right, we've got to have a good balance between all of those things in the Delta and the ag world. As far as bringing back some new areas of business that are going to attract new people to come, going to create some new jobs. It's going to have to be, in my opinion, more shift geared towards these things, because that's what builds on top of each other. And if we put the call out to the world, we need these talented people to come here, and hey, here's what we're going to do for you. B, it's cheap. It's got to all come together. But there are people out there that over time that we just need to be able to attract, to come to Marianna, Arkansas. It's where I'd like to see them. But,
all right. Yeah. In your work areas this next year, next 5 years, what are you going to be focused on mostly?
Well, we're going to really be focused. Our slogan is building communities, changing lives. So we're really focused on providing access to capital in areas where capital doesn't flow. So what's happening in the banking space, you're seeing mass consolidation in banks. 20 years ago, there were over 15,000 banks in America. Today, there are less than 6,000. That decline has been largely felt in rural and low wealth communities. And so we've just completed the capital campaign. We're growing. We've been very profitable. It's been a very good time for us. And we're looking to really acquire some of those small banks that are struggling. So if you don't have scale, it is hard to make it in the banking space today. And so we're growing. We're in a growth mode. And so I hope to see us continue to grow throughout our region, both in Arkansas, Mississippi, and the states that surround us.
How about you, Elizabeth?
We are going to be deploying broadband in the Arkansas and Mississippi Delta and in 2 counties in Oklahoma, rural counties. We have one grant, well, it's not a grant, it's a CAF money from the federal government, $12.2 million. The bulk of that is coming into Arkansas. And our mission is connect the unconnected, and we're going to do our best to solve at least one of the infrastructure problems that I perceive. When you start getting into South Arkansas in particular, there's just very, very little existing infrastructure, and we're hoping to solve part of that problem.
Davy, how about you? What are you going to be focused on this next year?
I think one of the most rewarding things about being a banker is being able to, at least indirectly participate in, our customer success. And, it's those men and women, these entrepreneurs, and just really Main Street, big Wall Street, whatever it is, to be able to help those people do what they do and create jobs and be successful is rewarding. So, continue that. I mean, and again, kind of, bringing that back into context about making Arkansas, further prosper. I mean, it's drawing those kind of people into our state, and those are the people that go out and get stuff done. And to be able to help them and to continue to focus and support, I think that's our role in that process. So continue to do that.
I can't. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
I just want to say one thing.
Yeah.
So, I actually grew up in the land of opportunity, well before it became the natural state. And I have.
Sanders watching that.
No, I mean, it is a natural state. I get it, but the truth of the matter is, Arkansas is a land of opportunity. It is low cost. If you can make something happen in this state, the world is your oyster. I think that Arkansas has to focus on its economic development and bringing in these people and creating the infrastructure so that those people want to come and live in this state, because as far as what Arkansas has to offer, it has a huge amount to offer. pretty much across the board.
Well, and we're small enough, too, that you can connect with people. I think
Exactly.
that's one of the things that I have found year over year over year, decade over decade, in talking to people that have moved here from Arkansas. It's like I can walk down the street and meet someone. I can know someone who knows the person I need to talk to. You're literally 1 degree of separation removed from making something happen. That is a advantage for us. I cannot have this panel without asking one final politics question here. Politics policy. What do the 20s hold in store for politics in Arkansas? Darrin, you get to go first.
Start this off. Well, and, you know, when Dave and I served in the Arkansas General Assembly, I think it was a different place. It was not quite as divided on partisan basis. I mean, the numbers were different. And of course, when I came in, we had over 70 Democrats, and by the time I left, we were not. We were the minority party. But you've seen that further decline of the Democratic Party in the Arkansas House of Representatives. I don't think that's going to change very much over the next several years. What I hope I will see is the ability to work together. And not so much DC-style partisanship, which when we were there, and maybe because I was in the majority party most of the time, but even when Davy was our speaker, you know, I don't think that the state of Arkansas would have passed the Affordable Health Care Act if Davy Carter were not speaker, because he was able to bring people together, both the Republicans and Democrats, because it was not popular in his party. It was popular in my party, but he had to convince his people. And that has done more for the health of this state than anything's happened in years. But not only just the health of the state, but it's done more for the small rural hospitals who would not be here but for having passed that. And I hope that you will see the next in the 20s. You'll see the kind of working together that Dave and I try to do. I served as his speaker pro tem, a Democrat serving for a Republican. I hope you'll see more of that in this upcoming 10 years of politics.
Elizabeth,
I'm going to let Davy speak first, and then I'll
Go ahead, Davy.
Clean up better.
No, well, thank you for those words, Darrin. I mean, that was a team effort, and it did take a lot of people coming together in a difficult time, and it was a special period. And you know, I don't see it changing back to those days overnight. You know, I think both parties have gotten off on some tangents, and people are divided, and you know, there's a lot of stuff going on nationally, and I don't think anybody should be spiking the ball, because most people I talk to are pretty fed up with everybody. Right. And you know, and that's 8 out of 9 people, and so you know, it's very concerning. You know, I think there's you know, it's economic risk. I mean, we hear around our banking table. It's just, you know, it's get the politicians out of our way. People would feel more at ease. So you know, I think next year I don't see it getting any better, but you know, I hope that one day you know, things will come back, and more reasonable people will prevail, and the truth, you know, will matter again, right? And just the old do-right rule that we used to talk about. So not optimistic, but in the short run, but am in the long run.
All right, Elizabeth, you get the last word.
I 100% agree. One of the things that I've always been involved in politics, though I've never run for office, and one of the things that I've always loved about this state was that we elected the person. It wasn't so much the party, and that changed, honestly, and it changed with the national money coming in, with Citizens United, and with all of this national rhetoric, which sometimes doesn't really apply to the state. Sometimes what and it's not a particular party, either party is pushing is not in the best interest of Arkansas. And I really would like to get back to the place where we're talking about what's in the best interest of Arkansas, regardless of whether it has a particular label on it. I don't think the labels have helped the state at all. I agree that it's going to be a Republican-controlled state house probably for the foreseeable future, but I don't think that should matter. It really shouldn't matter what party's in control. It should matter, are we all working together to do what's in the best interest of the state? So it would be my hope that we can get there, and I think we can, obviously not in 2020, because there's too much polarization on a national level.
Decade, though, so
maybe in another 4 years, because I think we're going to see a little more polarization before we come back together.
I think that's an accurate observation. All right, Darrin, Elizabeth, Davy, thank you all very much. This has been enlightening. I appreciate you.
Thank you for having us.
Enjoy it.